I always thought the Marina was the one place the HOA couldn't touch. They had rules for everything else: paint colors, mailbox styles, even what kind of potted plants you were allowed to put outside your door. But down by the water? That was mine. My vintage cabin cruiser sat in its slip like it belonged there, because it did. My dad and I restored that boat when I was 16. Every dent, every polished rail, every rebuilt engine part felt like a memory. So on the mornings I drank coffee on the deck, listening to the water slap gently against the hull, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. That peace ended the moment I saw the envelope taped to my front door. Bold red letters screamed, "Final Notice," even though I'd never received a first one. I tore it open, and the ridiculousness hit me immediately. The HOA was ordering me to move the boat within 72 hours. Their reason: the boat violated aesthetic length guidelines. I knew for a fact no such rule existed. I had every bylaw printed in a binder. If they wanted me to follow their rules, the least they could do was follow their own. I walked straight to the HOA office, letter in hand. The president, a woman who acted like she owned the entire subdivision, barely looked up from her laptop. I placed the letter on the table between us. She smirked the moment she saw it. She didn't even try to hide it. "It's too big," she said, without explanation. "We voted on adding a limit." "When?" I asked. "Last night," she replied, as if that made it legitimate. "Effective immediately." "So you created a rule overnight just to target my boat?" "Enforcement begins today," she said, ignoring the question. "Move it, or we'll escalate fines." I walked out before I said something irreversible. The next morning, I saw a tow truck backing toward the Marina. I sprinted down the walkway. The driver hopped out, apologizing as he read off an order number the HOA provided. I shoved the Marina permit in his face. "My boat is legally docked. If you touch it, you'll be trespassing." He checked the permit, checked the HOA order, and shook his head. "I'm not touching this. They can take it up with the county." He drove off while the HOA president watched from the sidewalk with her arms crossed, furious that her plan failed. That should have been the end of it. But instead of admitting they were wrong, they doubled down. The next day I found another envelope. This one claiming daily fines had already begun accumulating. I called the HOA office. They refused to answer. I emailed. No reply. They were stonewalling me, hoping I'd crack. I wasn't cracking. Around that time, an elderly neighbor, Mr. Fenton, was walking his dog by the Marina when he saw me fuming over the latest letter. He leaned on the railing beside me and quietly said, "You know, the Marina lines around here used to be different." I turned to him. "Different how?" "Back when the developer built this place," he said, "that walkway wasn't technically HOA property. There was something about a public easement. County got involved. Don't know what happened after. Most folks forgot about it." A public easement? It sounded far-fetched, but something about the way he said it stuck with me. The HOA acted confident, but their desperation felt forced. If they truly had authority over the Marina, they wouldn't need to invent rules overnight. They wouldn't attempt illegal tows. They wouldn't hide behind unanswered emails. That night, I drove to the county clerk's office. They weren't open, but they had a public records terminal available for after-hours use. I typed in the subdivision name and waited as old PDFs loaded slowly, like ghosts dragging themselves across a dusty screen. There it was, a document labeled Easement Plat 1974. I opened it, expecting nothing. My stomach flipped. The easement wasn't small. It wasn't some 2-foot strip of land no one cared about. It extended across the exact walkway the HOA used to access the Marina. It covered part of the parking area. And most surprising of all, the easement overlapped with the northern corner of my lot. My deed, updated later, included the easement boundaries without any mention of the HOA's control. If that document was correct, then technically, the HOA wasn't using their own land. They were using mine. I kept digging. Another document surfaced, an outdated agreement between the original developer and the county. It stated the easement was to remain public unless renewed every 20 years by whichever governing body managed the marina. The last renewal was dated more than 2 decades ago, meaning the easement had already reverted. Meaning no one, not the residents, not the HOA, had legal access to that walkway without permission. I leaned back in the chair, mind racing. The pieces clicked together perfectly. The HOA wasn't trying to enforce a rule. They were trying to bully me before I discovered they had no jurisdiction over the marina at all. It made sense why they changed the rule overnight. Why they tried to tow the boat illegally. Why they refused to respond. They knew they were standing on thin ice. They just didn't think I'd ever look down. As I printed the documents, one thought repeated in my head. They picked the wrong homeowner. I walked out of the county building with a folder under my arm, and for the first time since the whole mess started, I wasn't angry. I wasn't anxious. I wasn't stressed. I was calm. Because now I knew exactly what I was going to do, and they weren't going to see it coming. The next morning, I spread the documents across my kitchen table. Seeing the easement lines printed clearly in black and white gave me a sense of confidence I hadn't felt in days. The marina walkway, the access path, the small parking strip, all of it overlapped with my property. The HOA had been using land they didn't control. They were so used to barking orders that they never imagined someone might dig deeper. I contacted a quiet title attorney. When I handed him the documents, he adjusted his glasses and read them twice, then a third time, slower. The longer he stared, the more his eyebrows lifted. "You understand what this means?" he asked. "I think I do," I said. "It means they've been trespassing for years," he replied. "This easement reverted back to you automatically when the HOA failed to renew it. You can legally reclaim control of the entire walkway. What about the marina access?" He flipped through pages, then tapped one paragraph with his pen. "You own the controlling strip. Whoever owns this strip controls entry to the marina. If you file a quiet title claim, you can lock it down until the court finalizes ownership." It was the first time in this whole mess that someone said the words I needed to hear. "You're in the right." We prepared the filing immediately. While the attorney drafted paperwork, I walked outside to grab my mail, and found a new envelope waiting for me. This one was thicker than the previous notices. Inside was a stack of fines totaling more than $8,000. They accused me of boat noncompliance, public obstruction, and even community endangerment, as if my boat was somehow threatening the neighborhood. They weren't just pushing, they were throwing everything they had, hoping something would stick. It only made me more determined. That afternoon, I returned to the HOA office. Not to argue, just to deliver a message. When the president saw me through the glass door, she sighed loudly, like dealing with me was the greatest inconvenience of her day. "What now?" she asked. "Consider this notice," I said calmly. "Any further entry onto the marina walkway without my explicit permission will be treated as trespassing." She laughed in my face. "Your permission? You don't own our marina." "You sure about that?" I asked, placing a photocopy of the easement plat on her desk. The smirk slipped. She scanned the page, eyes darting from one boundary line to another. "This doesn't prove anything," she snapped. "These are old documents. The HOA owns the marina access. We've always owned it." "Then you won't mind showing me your easement renewal paperwork," I said. "The one your board was supposed to file every 20 years. Her jaw clenched. She didn't have it. She knew she didn't have it. For a moment, all the power she'd been swinging around so freely evaporated. "You're bluffing," she whispered. "You'll find out soon," I replied. That night, my attorney filed the quiet title claim with the county. Early the next morning, the county surveyor called me personally. He wanted to meet at the marina to verify the property lines. When I arrived, he already had his equipment set up along the walkway. The HOA president stood nearby with her arms crossed, pretending not to panic even though her eyes darted nervously each time the surveyor tapped a marker into the ground. After an hour of measurements, he walked over to me. "You weren't wrong," he said. "This entire stretch falls inside your boundary line. Until the court rules otherwise, you have the right to restrict access to protect your property." The HOA president overheard him and exploded. "You can't do that. You can't just take the marina." "I'm not taking anything," I said. "I'm securing what legally belongs to me." "That walkway belongs to this community," she screamed. "No," the surveyor replied calmly. "Legally, it belongs to him." The HOA president stormed off, furious and humiliated. I didn't waste any time. With the surveyor's confirmation documented, I hired a contractor to install temporary fencing across the entrance of the walkway. The sound of the drill echoing across the marina drew a crowd. Homeowners gathered in confusion, whispering among themselves. Some looked angry, but most looked curious, waiting for an explanation. The HOA president rushed toward us, shouting that I wasn't allowed to touch community property. But the sheriff, who had been notified by the surveyor, walked up at the same moment and asked her to step back. "This is a legal easement dispute," he said. "He has authority to secure his property while the county completes its review." The HOA president looked like she wanted to scream but didn't dare challenge the sheriff. Meanwhile, I attached a laminated sign to the new gate: "Easement under legal claim. Access temporarily closed by order of property owner." The moment that sign went up, chaos erupted. Boat owners demanded explanations. Residents panicked about losing access to their slip. People accused the HOA of hiding paperwork. A few even turned against the president right there, shouting that they were tired of her power trip. The yacht club president stormed up to me next, jabbing a finger toward my chest. "You're shutting down an entire marina over a boat rule?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm enforcing property rights your HOA ignored." "This is going to cost people money," he growled. "It already cost me," I said. "They should have left me alone." The sheriff stepped between us and ordered everyone to back off. The HOA president retreated with her board members, whispering frantically as if trying to salvage control. By sunset, the marina was completely closed. People stood on the shore staring at their boats like they were imprisoned. The HOA sent a mass email accusing me of hostile action, but the moment I replied with the easement documents, half the neighborhood stopped siding with them. The next morning, my attorney called. "They want an emergency meeting," he said. "They want to negotiate." I looked out the window at the padlocked gate, the fencing, and the row of abandoned boats stuck behind it. The HOA called the emergency meeting less than 24 hours after the marina shut down. They didn't ask politely. They demanded it, as if they were still in charge. But the tone had shifted. Their emails no longer held threats, they held desperation. Closing the marina cut off access to more than 30 boats, and residents were furious. Not at me. At them. I agreed to the meeting but on my terms. My attorney sat beside me as the HOA board filtered into the small conference room. They looked exhausted, like they hadn't slept. The president tried to maintain her usual confidence, but her hands shook as she shuffled her papers. Before anyone said a word, the yacht club president burst in. He wasn't even on the HOA board, but he was the loudest voice in the neighborhood. He glared at me with a mix of frustration and fear. "You've turned this place upside down," he said. "What do you want?" My attorney cleared his throat. "Before negotiations begin, let's establish the truth. My client's claim is backed by county survey, developer documents, and lapses in easement renewal. The marina walkway is legally part of his property. The HOA has been using it without rights." The HOA president snapped. "Those documents are outdated." "They're active," the attorney replied. "If they weren't, the county surveyor would have ruled otherwise." She tried to argue, but every point she threw out was weak. Every attempt to deflect only reminded the board of the mess they created. When she claimed I was endangering the community, My attorney slid the easement plat across the table. The board members studied it closely. One of them muttered, "This goes back to the original developer. How did we miss this?" Because they were too focused on writing new rules instead of understanding the property they governed. After 20 minutes of watching them scramble through excuses, I decided I'd heard enough. "You wanted this meeting," I said. "So let's talk about what happens next." The HOA president straightened, as if ready to reclaim authority. "Yes. The next step is reopening the marina. Immediately. Residents are angry, boating season is starting, and your actions." I cut her off. "My actions? You fined me $8,000 for a rule you invented overnight. You tried towing my legally docked boat. You sent people onto my property without permission. And all of it was based on land you don't even own." The room went still. For once, no one tried to talk over me. I continued, "This situation only exists because you assumed no one would push back. You expected me to roll over. I didn't." The yacht club president crossed his arms. "What do you want from the HOA? Just say it." I had already drafted my demands. I spoke clearly, without hesitation. First, every bogus fine needs to be erased permanently. Second, I want written acknowledgement that the boat size rule was created improperly and will be removed. Third, I want a formal apology for the harassment I've dealt with these last 2 weeks. The HOA president's face twisted. "Absolutely not. We're not apologizing for enforcing community standards." "You weren't enforcing standards," I said. "You were targeting me." A board member turned toward her and whispered, "Honestly, he's right." For the first time, she looked genuinely rattled. The attorney leaned in. "And that's only the beginning. My client also intends to charge a temporary cooperation fee for use of the Marina walkway until the quiet title claim is resolved. This is standard, and the HOA will need to pay it." "What fee?" she asked sharply. "A monthly access fee," he explained. "The HOA will collect from residents as usual, but the walkway owner receives the controlling share." The board murmured among themselves. The number wasn't huge, but it wasn't small either. It was enough to sting but not enough to bankrupt anyone. Exactly what I wanted, an amount that reminded them of the value of what they had been taking for granted. The HOA president slammed her folder shut. "He's extorting us." "He's charging for land he owns," my attorney corrected. "Just like any other property owner would." The yacht club president rubbed his forehead. "Look, we just want access back. This isn't sustainable." "It wasn't sustainable when your HOA tried to bully me," I said. "But now that it affects everyone else, it suddenly matters." He didn't argue. He knew I was right. The county surveyor's report had already been circulated among the board. Every line of it supported my claim. They weren't negotiating from power. They were negotiating from fear of a lawsuit they couldn't win. After a tense minute, one board member spoke. "If we agree to the fee and erase the fines, do you reopen the marina?" "Yes," I said. "Once everything is signed." "And the apology?" the president muttered. "Yes," I repeated. "Public. Written. Sent to every resident." She scoffed, but the rest of the board stared at her expectantly. She had no support left. Even her vice president looked ready to resign on the spot if she refused. "Fine," she finally said. "We'll write it." My attorney slid a prepared agreement across the table. She looked at it like it was poison, but she signed. The rest of the board followed. The yacht club president didn't sign. He wasn't HOA, but he exhaled deeply in relief. When the last signature dried, my attorney nodded. "Congratulations. You now control access to the Marina walkway and have full authority until the quiet title ruling." The HOA president glared at me. "You think you've won?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't smile. I simply gathered the papers and stood. "No," I said. "I think I've held you accountable." As I left the meeting room, homeowners waited outside, having heard rumors but not the truth. They stared at me, waiting. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The look on the HOA president's face said everything. I walked back to the fenced marina, keys in hand, and the setting sun reflected on the rows of locked gates. For the first time, it felt like I wasn't the one trapped behind them. They were. The morning after the agreement was signed, I woke to an inbox full of messages. Some were from neighbors thanking me for standing up to the HOA. Others wanted to know when the marina would reopen. And then there was the email from the HOA president, an apology letter so stiff and reluctant that you could practically hear her teeth grinding through every sentence. But it didn't matter. The apology existed. It was public. And it was proof the board finally accepted responsibility for the mess they created. I forwarded the letter to my attorney, then headed down to the marina with a toolbox in hand. The fencing I'd put up still stood firm, metal glinting under the early sunlight. The walkway beyond it looked abandoned, like a quiet reminder that power doesn't belong to the loudest voice but to the one holding the actual ground beneath them. As I approached the gate, a small crowd gathered, mostly curious boat owners who had been waiting for days to return to their slip. They didn't shout demands. They didn't blame me. They simply watched, aware that everything happening now was the result of the HOA's arrogance, not mine. I unlocked the padlocks one by one. Each click felt like a turning point. When the final lock came free, a few people actually clapped. I stepped aside and let them pass, but before they rushed in, I made something clear. Access is open again, I said, but new rules apply. They're posted right at the entrance. Every person who walked through stopped to read. The rules were simple. Respect the property, follow safety guidelines, and understand that misuse of the walkway would result in suspension of access. Nothing extreme. Nothing unfair. But the shift was undeniable. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was leading. Throughout the day, residents moved around the marina with quiet relief. The anger that had raged earlier in the week had settled into something calmer, something almost grateful. They didn't like the HOA's behavior any more than I did. They just never had a way to challenge it. Now they saw it was possible. The yacht club president approached me in the afternoon, no longer aggressive, just exhausted. He extended a hand. "I don't like how this played out," he said. "But you weren't wrong. They overreached." I shook his hand. "All I ever wanted was to be left alone." "Maybe now you will be," he replied. Not long after, word spread that the HOA president had resigned. The board claimed it was her personal decision, but everyone knew the truth. She couldn't recover from the apology. She couldn't recover from losing her grip on the marina. And she certainly couldn't recover from the backlash within her own board. Her resignation email was short and cold, filled with platitudes about community unity and moving forward. But what struck me wasn't her exit, it was the shift inside the HOA. The remaining board members started sending more transparent updates, actually referencing bylaws instead of inventing them. They asked residents for input instead of forcing new rules on them. It was as if the entire organization had been shaken awake. Later that evening, I walked down the newly reopened walkway alone. The marina was quiet except for the sound of boats rocking gently against their rope. My cabin cruiser sat in its slip, perfectly still under the dim harbor lights. For the first time since the HOA's first letter, I felt peace returning. Not the fragile kind that can be interrupted by a knock on the door, but the sturdy kind that comes from knowing I fought back and won. I stepped aboard and ran my hand along the rail. This boat used to be just a connection to my father. A piece of memory. Now it represented something else too, a line I refused to let anyone cross. While I sat there, a thought settled in. This fight wasn't just about a boat. It was about the way people in power assume they can dictate other people's lives. The HOA had spent years intimidating residents, pushing boundaries, and acting like they owned everything within the subdivision. For the first time, someone held them accountable, and the community had seen it with their own eyes. I wasn't interested in running the HOA or becoming some new authority figure. But I wasn't going to let them slip back into their old ways either. And with the cooperation fee in effect, they now had a financial reminder every month that abusing power had consequences. Before heading home, I made one last walk along the Marina path. The new lighting I'd installed brightened the walkway better than the HOA ever bothered to. Security cameras quietly monitored access, providing safety without intrusion. The place felt more cared for than it ever had under the board's control. As I reached the end of the path, I noticed Mr. Fenton, the elderly neighbor who first mentioned the easement, watching the water with his dog. When he saw me, he smiled. "Knew something was off with that walkway," he said. "You were right," I replied. "More right than anyone realized." He chuckled softly. "Sometimes people forget old things matter. Old documents, old agreements. Just like old boats." I nodded, appreciating the subtle wisdom. When I finally walked back home, I realized something simple but important. Peace wasn't handed to me. I had to fight for it. I had to claim it. Just like I claimed that easement. The HOA once told me to move my boat. Instead, I moved their entire power structure. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't break rules. I didn't fight dirty. I just used the truth they tried to ignore. And now the marina stands exactly as it should. Open, secure, and under the control of the person who actually cares about it. I stepped inside my house, closed the door behind me, and smiled. For the first time in a long time, the neighborhood finally felt quiet again. Not because the HOA ordered it, but because I earned it.